Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the host of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. No matter where you are in the world, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes of your day to hear my thoughts. As always, we have a great show for you today. Now, here are our topics. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. Today, the topic of discussion is Trump rallies. Now, I have been trying to think about an episode to do that would be conducive to the time that we're in. We're approaching an election, and it feels like the most important way I can use this podcast is to talk about things that are relevant to this election. And there's a lot of different topics that I could have touched on, but the one thing that I felt like I really just needed to speak my piece on was about the misperceptions that I'm seeing, along the lines of this election, whether it be on the left or on the right. The misperceptions around Trump, misperceptions around Biden, around this election, about what the outcome of this election will hold. But most importantly, I wanted to talk about kind of the misperceptions around Trump rallies. And you may be surprised about why that would be where I'd want to go, but let me just take a quick few minutes here to explain to you why I felt like this was the place where I wanted to start. The media tries to portray Trump a certain way. Mostly when you hear about Trump on the left side of the media, you hear him being described as, someone who's a racist, someone who's a sexist, someone who doesn't care about the country, someone who's, not a good leader. But most importantly, I think the thing that you constantly hear from the media is that Trump is just this walking buffoon. He's just a stupid person, right? Has no idea what he's doing at any moment of any time. And, I have to say that for a while there, I felt the same way. And I thought that because I felt like maybe I was absorbing all the same media that everyone else was absorbing. I watched The Daily Show. I occasionally watch those late night talk shows, whether it be Stephen Colbert's show or maybe sometimes some of the other shows. I mean, I've seen plenty of segments on MSNBC and CNN. I've read my fair share of articles from the New York Times, the Washington Post. They're pretty unanimous in how they feel about Trump. He's a walking moron and has no idea what he's doing. And I feel as though portraying him in that light has done a disservice to those of us who don't ever really take the time to listen to what he has to say. Maybe you've heard a quick snippet. Maybe you've heard a quick little video edited. Maybe you've heard something that's been cut up and chopped. But, a lot of the times I feel like, you don't really get the full context if you don't listen to it in its entirety. And right now I probably sound like a Trump apologist for saying something like that. But hear me out for a second. This isn't really about apologizing or anything like that in regards to Trump. This is about understanding the full perspective. Because in my opinion, Trump is not stupid whatsoever, nor are the people who write his speeches, which he has for his rallies. In fact, the truth, I think, is very much the opposite. This actually is very calculated. And in my opinion, it makes it all that much worse for those of us who do not agree with what the president says. So let me take this episode to explain to you what happens at Trump rallies that I have experienced and why exactly that should matter to you. So to begin here, I have always been curious about understanding both sides of the coin when it comes to a conversation. I typically believe that the media can be biased on both sides. And so for a long time, I made a habit of watching CNN and Fox News to see if I couldn't get maybe where the actual story was in between both of the biases. And so when I finally got the desire to kind of apply that same feeling towards Trump, I went and listened to one of his campaign rallies on YouTube. Obviously, I didn't travel to some state to watch him personally, but they always put his rallies online. So I sat there and I listened. And I listened again, and I listened again. I think I listened to 3 or 4 of them in the last couple of years. But for this episode, I decided to listen to the most recent one. So I listened to both of the rallies that he had in Pennsylvania in the last week of September. So the thing that I really wanted to kind of like discover was, is this really all off the cuff? Is he really just a blubbering person who's up there just saying random things to get people to laugh at him? Sometimes, yeah. But a lot of the times, what you'll notice if you're watching these rallies is that he is more or less reading off of a script. He's reading a speech. These words aren't things that he's just coming up with off the top of the head. They're prepared for him. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that they're prepared for him by somebody else. So he has speechwriters who are writing out some of the things that are being said. And when you come to that realization, you realize that Trump isn't, just saying these things because he is a person who maybe, feels semi-racist or feels a certain way. These are talking points that are crafted for him, which means that they are trying to create this divisiveness. It is actually an orchestrated plan by them. And so instead of trying to talk about generalities, let me just talk about a little bit more specifics, because when you get to a Trump rally, you have to understand exactly what you're seeing here, because half of our country right now is totally engrossed with this person. Trump is their hero. When I talk to Trump supporters that I know, they are in love with this person for one reason or another. It's unlike anything that I've seen maybe outside of the support that I've seen for Bernie Sanders. And so the Trump rallies, they kind of operate, like an event. You see American pride on full display. Everyone's wearing some kind of flag memorabilia. Everyone has Trump memorabilia on them. It almost looks like what you would expect at a concert, just a bunch of people, really in an amazing mood. The energy's really high. It is an event for a lot of people. And when they get there, they're being treated to lots of, good music. There's warm-up acts. A bunch of people come out and kind of jazz up the crowd, almost like they're getting ready to listen to a comedy special. And Trump comes off of his plane, to, God bless the USA. It's a full spectacle, honestly. And so you get to the point where when you're watching this and, if you're trying to be objective about it, you realize that, the idea here is that we're trying to gin people up to get ready for this really big moment. And then when Trump comes out, the first things that he loves to do is kind of just lie about the things that he claims that he has done, but hasn't really done. He'll just say random things to make himself look good, I think. And he'll just throw out these generalities all over the place. One of the things that he said during this most recent rally is that I've done everything that I've said and more. And then he'll talk about how the last time that he, ran in Pennsylvania, that he won that state easily, even though doing some research of my own, he won that state by 43,000 votes out of 6 million ballots that were cast. He won by less than 0.1%. But it doesn't really matter, because his fans will believe anything that he says. It's gotten to the point now where the one thing that he loves to do during these events is to constantly look at the back of the room where most of the media is placed and say that the media is just fake news, right? You've heard him say that numerous times, but what really the point is that he's trying to drive home there is that if anybody does not agree with him, if anyone does not like him, they are against him, and therefore they're against you. Because he tries to make these rallies more or less about the fact that what he believes is a reflection on the American people. And so if anyone doesn't believe what he believes, then they're against America. But we'll get to that more here in a second. First, I want to keep talking about some of the things that he was saying that just weren't factual. And, just to keep things completely fair here, I know that he constantly talks about the fact that like the fake news, what he says, which is basically news that says anything bad about him. The fake news will never, talk about the good things that he does. And there is some truth to that. I think one of the reasons why Trump is able to kind of build validity with his followers is because the CNN, MSNBC, all the liberal media has actually done a disservice to itself by only focusing on all the negatives that President Trump does. I mean, they almost never talk about anything positive that has happened. And while I know that might be hard for people to hear who don't like him, but there have been some positive things that have happened under the Trump administration. And while the positives, in my opinion, are way outweighed by the negatives, it does not really look good if your network, basically the end of every story equals Trump is bad. It doesn't give you the credibility that you need to be unbiased. And so now it's more or less, it just feeds into his narrative of us versus them. And so Trump's able to use that ability into just basically being able to tell people that he's done things that he hasn't done. Like when he says that all of the troops are coming home, when in fact that is not the case. Most of the troops have stayed in Afghanistan, even though we have apparently signed this peace deal with the Taliban saying that the war was over. Trump said that the military was depleted when he got into office, that he rebuilt it. The military can't be depleted when we are constantly spending more money than the next 10 to 15 countries combined. We've never stopped increasing our spending on our military. Trump claims that he has bigger victories than he has, but that doesn't really matter because no one's going to spend the time to fact check him. And that is honestly one of the geniuses of Trump in and of itself, is that he actually lies so much that after you start fact checking him for 3 or 4 minutes, you get so pissed off that you don't even want to talk anymore. And therefore, basically he's normalized disinformation. And, it's really something that becomes challenging when you're trying to take, a neutral position on this, because it's easy for me to be biased. I can just flat out say that I don't like Trump. That's really easy for me to say. But, right now, my main objective here is not to just call Trump names and say that he's a bad guy. I want to define it. I wanted to define it so that when we have these conversations with the people that we know who might support this person or might be indifferent to Trump, we can speak to the exact reasons why Trump is not fit for office, not just Trump is bad, therefore he needs to go. I don't think that's good enough because it's not reaching enough people. We need to address this in a different way. The way that Trump talks about, his opposition, it's not what we're used to seeing, and it's not good for this country as far as I'm concerned. When he's not lying about things that he claims to have accomplished, the next thing he always loves to do is talk about how if Democrats were in power, that the rights of the American people would be gone. He said in his most recent rally that if he was not in office, that the Second Amendment rights would be obliterated for everyone in America. And at no point in time has Joe Biden ever talked about taking away guns or limiting gun rights in any way other than establishing universal background checks, which is just basically trying to keep people who might, have a felony conviction or might be not mentally fit to own a weapon from having a firearm. It wouldn't do anything to a normal gun owner, but that's not how they frame these conversations. It's just, if Democrats are in office, your Second Amendment goes away. And then he would say things like, if the Democrats are in office, then they'll pass the radical Green New Deal and all of your jobs will go away because you won't have any energy jobs anymore. Basically trying to turn the climate debate into a jobs debate. And so since he has this position of authority, he's able to convince his followers that the climate debate really isn't a debate about saving the planet. It's a debate about the Democrats want to come take your money. I mean, and that is a talking point that unfortunately I've heard him say at multiple rallies at this point. And I feel like that just by itself, just to isolate on that point for one quick moment here, that is something that I feel like if you have a Trump, friend in your life, a friend who is a Trump supporter, That is something that we really need to have a better conversation about in this country. This idea that trying to address climate change isn't about government overreach. It's about trying to create a sustainable planet for the rest of our children, for ourselves, for our grandchildren. This shouldn't really be a matter of, jobs versus no jobs. There are plenty of ways to replace these oil and gas jobs with new green energy jobs. We don't have to make this about, if we do these things, then our way of life will go away. Or if we get rid of coal mining, what will happen to the coal miners? We can find a way to save the planet and make sure that people don't go poor at the same time. And so I think it's terrible that Trump tries to paint it as if we try to address climate change, then people are going to go poor. But, just moving on here, I later heard him say that, if the Democrats, are going to continue to be in office, then, your churches will remain closed, because the only reason that your churches are closed right now is because the Democrats hate God. And it's just inflammatory things like that just don't make any sense to me. He knows that a lot of churches are closed in a lot of states because of the fact of coronavirus, and every state having their own different set of rules, which is only the case because the federal government, being him, did not want to implement national mandates, so they left it up to the states. But that's besides the point. But the point is that churches are closed in certain communities because of coronavirus. It's nothing to do with Democrats hating God, but that's the way that he chose to frame it. Just time and time again, this really, the narrative comes down to in these Trump rallies is that Trump is trying to paint it as it's us versus them. And he literally said that. He referred to the Democrats as the enemy. And said recently, as I'm sure most people heard, that the only way that I'll lose in November is if it's rigged. As if saying basically that there's no way that it will be a legitimate election if enough people voted me out. Sowing further dissent into his followers. And he goes on to say that red states have no crime, only blue states do. It's all these Democrat cities. And I'm sure you've heard that, talking point being relabeled online. He's telling people in his rallies to watch out for ballot sneakiness because Democrats are going to try to mess with the ballots. So he told people if they saw weird things happening with their ballots to contact their local authorities. I mean, he was saying that, we need to vote him back into power so that we reject socialism because everyone in the Democratic Party is a socialist, which that's news to me since I'm pretty sure that they went way out of their way to make sure that the only person who claimed to be a democratic socialist did not get on the ticket. So, but mostly the thing that bothered me was that, every time that he referred to Joe Biden, he referred to him as, someone who was radical left and that if he gets into office, he's going to destroy the country. He said, if the Dems win, you'll lose all your rights, your Constitution will be worthless, and you'll never recover. That is an exact quote that I pulled from 1 hour and 3 minutes into his speech he gave in Pittsburgh this past week. And so the point I'm really trying to drive home here is that, what Trump is doing is something that, really needs to be broken down specifically. Because this is more than just the rantings of someone who's dumb. This is more than just the rantings of some buffoon. This is not how Trevor Noah paints him out to be. This is not how John Oliver paints him out to be. He's not just some bumbling idiot who's just randomly throwing out, just nasty things to say. This is a very calculated, scheme. This is, if I don't win, then your life will end. That's basically the picture he's trying to paint for all these people. And these people believe him. And he has also created this territory, basically. He's painted this picture to his followers that anyone who says anything bad about me is lying. Only I will tell you the truth. Only I tell you the truth. Only I care about you. You can only win through me. Through anyone else, you will fail. You will, be indoctrinated with, anti-American lies. He goes on to say in that rally that if the left wins, they're going to teach your children anti-American lies in the schools. And he was referring to the 1619 project that is being, I guess, implemented in certain areas of the country where they want to teach kids about the history of slavery in America because they feel as though it's not being covered well enough in a lot of elementary and middle schools. He also goes on to talk about how, he recently got rid of a regulation that allowed for low-income housing to be in the suburbs. And he said that he got rid of that regulation because he wanted to save the American dream. Basically saying that, when you live in the suburbs, you don't want to live around poor people anymore. It's time and time again, this is really about him trying to create this division in America. And that is honestly, like, when we really break this down here, going a little bit further, that is my main issue with Trump. Because this idea about it being us versus them, that is something that I feel as though everyone should reject in this country. I don't want to endorse any politician. I don't care what the letter is next to their name, that it's us versus them. And when I come back from the break here, I'm going to explain to you why I think that's so dangerous and what exactly we need to do going forward to talk about this in a better way. Hey there, Indie Thought listeners. Just want to tell you today about one of our sponsors, and that sponsor is Anchor, the program that I'm using right now to create a podcast. Now, we searched all over for different ways to make podcasts, and we decided on Anchor. There's lots of great things to know about them if you ever want to decide that you want to do a podcast. And why shouldn't you? Get your voice out there, make your voice heard. I'm sure that everyone feels a little intimidated at first when they think about, should I start a podcast? But basically, it's just a conversation that you're having just recorded. Nothing intimidating about it, and Anchor's the best place to start. It's easy, it's free. There are certain tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer or your tablet. I'm on a tablet right now, and Anchor will distribute your podcast to all the best places, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, a whole lot of them. You can make money from your podcast too, with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need in a one-stop shop. Definitely check out Anchor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, the app is free. You can download it to any phone or go to their website, anchor.fm. Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with me through this episode. I wanted to come to the second half of this episode talking about what exactly is the dangers of having this us versus them mentality. As I was saying in the last segment, I feel as though, one of the things that President Trump likes to do is create this idea amongst his followers that if you're not with me, you're against me. And the question really becomes is that really dangerous? And is it having an effect on people? And my opinion is that I think it is a very dangerous thing. I think we're seeing that play out all over the country, right? Whether it's protesters in the streets of all these cities, having clashes with each other, whether it's just people online just constantly fighting and bickering with one another, or whether it's just getting to the point now where people don't even want to talk to each other if they are, if they believe in politics that you don't believe in. I've heard people say that they won't date somebody who's a Trump supporter, or they will never invite somebody over to their house who's a liberal. And it's crazy to me that we've gotten to this point in our country, because it feels like maybe it was just 5 years ago that where, these were not topics that just divided us so much. And I'm not going to just blame this solely on Donald Trump because he is just one person regardless of the amount of power he holds. But the problem with me is when it comes to Trump is that at no point in time does he really seem to care about the impact that he's having on this country as far as the divisiveness is concerned. He doesn't seem interested in any way, shape, or form to bring the temperature down in the room, as Joe Biden likes to say. And I feel that. I feel as though there's so much just nastiness going on in the world. Trump could have done so much good by just saying something simple like, I don't agree with the way that the news, characterizes me. This is the way I see it. He could have just said something as simple as that, but he had to call them fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news. Just basically trying to create this idea that if you say anything bad about me, if you say anything against me, if someone says anything that contradicts what I said, it is wrong. And I know that people like to I know that people who are supporters of his get upset when, people on the left will call him like a dictator or a fascist or, something along those lines. But, Trump hasn't become that just yet, but he definitely uses those tools. I mean, those are the tools that are used in these authoritarian nations. This idea that anything that is said bad about me is unpatriotic, is not correct. Those people want to destroy our country. Like if you're a Trump supporter and you're listening to me right now and you're thinking to yourself, you're just some liberal bashing my president. Imagine taking those same exact words and putting them into the mouth of Barack Obama and then telling me how you feel about those same words being said. This really shouldn't be about the letter D or the letter R next to somebody's name. This shouldn't really be about if you're a Trump supporter or not. This should be about what kind of leadership we want in our country. Do we really want Trump's leadership? Are we okay with this idea that, if you're not with me, you're my enemy? Would you be okay if a Democratic president said that? Would you be okay if a Democratic president, was running, or politician was running for office and his campaign was constantly saying things like, if you vote Republican, you're going to burn down the country. If you vote Republican, all of your rights are going to go away. If you vote Republican, you're an enemy of the people. Would you be okay with that? I don't think anyone should be okay with that. That's not the language that I want to hear from any politician. And this is having an impact on people. You don't really need to look at studies online or in papers about what kind of impact this is having on the people of America. We all see it for ourselves. We know how toxic it is right now to be out in this country and talk about your political views, especially if it's to somebody who you think might be differentiating in opinions from you. It feels so unnerving right now. And people's emotions are so high. Like they feel as though if you disagree with them, then you're an enemy. And we do not need that division in this country. And to be fair right now, it doesn't just come from Trump. It doesn't. It comes from the left as well. This idea that, if you don't believe the way that we believe, then you're the issue. And I know that I've spent most of the time on this episode focusing on Trump and how he does that. And the reason that I do that is because at the end of the day, he is the president. We can talk about whataboutisms all day long about who does this and who does that. But when you're the president, you're supposed to be the leader of the country. You are the head of the most powerful country in human history. You have to set an example. And I understand that there's going to be some people in this country who are going to not be setting a good example, but you have to set the best example. That's what we elect you to do. That is why you have that job. That is a part of your job. Your job is supposed to make America great for everyone, not just for the people who vote for you. But I do not feel as though Trump is capable of that. I don't think he wants anything to do with that. He just wants to create more fire. And that is, in essence, why I don't and cannot ever support the man. I understand that maybe some policies are out there that certain people are really in favor of. Maybe you're a conservative and you really like his views on immigration. Maybe you like his tax views. Maybe you like his manufacturing job views or the fact that he's tough on China. I've heard plenty of reasons why people like Trump. It doesn't matter whether I agree with them or not. I understand why you think that way. And I'm sure there are other plenty of Republican politicians who could probably give you those same policy desires that you want. But Trump is not really the right person for this job. I mean, somebody his sole talking point is, you're either with me or you're against me, should not be fit to be running a country that is like ours. We are a divided country, not in the sense of, us hating each other, but in the sense that there are always going to be conservatives and liberals in this country. You're never going to have a situation where conservatives are just going to all pick up and leave, or liberals are all going to pick up and leave. When this election ends, the other side is still going to be here. It's not like they're going to self-deport. And so we need a leader who's going to look at, both sides of the country and say, this is how we come together. Not, if you're not with me, you're my enemy, which is the only thing that Trump seems to know how to do. And so, let's talk about the opposite thing here. If Biden got into office, would he fix everything in this country? And my answer to that simply is no. Biden's no hero. And I don't think that he's the answer that the American people need. I don't think that he's a solid politician. And honestly, I'm pretty upset that he's the choice that we have. I mean, the issue that I had trying to create this episode today was I was trying to find the right words to frame the argument that I knew I wanted to make. But it's hard to convince people not to vote for Trump when the other option is Biden, because Biden has provided no real tangible reason by why you should vote for him other than the fact that he's not Trump. And in my opinion, that's not good enough. It's not good enough to just not be Trump. And so I have honestly no real enthusiasm towards Biden himself. This is an election that is basically just a, do you support Trump or not support Trump? Because I don't really know anyone personally who's really excited about Biden. They're only excited about Biden through the transitive property that being excited about Biden means, being excited about getting rid of Trump. That's really what it boils down to. No one's actually just here for Biden. And that's sad that we're in this position where we don't have a candidate that we can believe in, because he hasn't spent any time really talking about, what he's going to do for America. He just keeps saying that he's not Trump. And so I hate that we're in this position. However, with that being said, the position still is what we are in. And I have tried to justify my not voting for Trump by saying that it doesn't matter that I'm not that excited about Biden, because at the end of the day, Trump has become someone, well, not really become, he's always been this way, but Trump is a president who is just toxic for this country. And I feel as though he's toxic for the people who also support him, because he does nothing but just inflame them with this idea that he's really great, that he does a bunch of things that he says he doesn't do, and that there's no point in trying to tell him when he lies, because he's made it clear that it doesn't matter when he lies, because he'll just keep telling you that it's not a lie. And then if you can prove that it's not a lie, well, then he'll tell you that it was taken out of context. And then if you can prove that it wasn't taken out of context, he'll just tell you it wasn't a big deal. And if you can claim that it is a big deal, he'll just tell you that it's a waste of time. It's always something with him. And I just feel as though that even though Biden is not the person that we need to come together and just understand that this person, Donald Trump, is not the kind of person that we need to have in the White House. And so what I think that people can do moving forward is just take a second to breathe when you're having a conversation with somebody who's on the different political spectrum than you are. Let's try to do this on a lower level, on a personal level. Maybe our politicians aren't the heroes that we need, but maybe we need to start setting the example. All of these online fights that we get into, all of these disagreements, all of these yelling matches on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you're on a social platform, they're not doing anything but furthering dividing us. I understand that there are nasty people out there who are just trolling. Don't interact with trolls. There are plenty of people out there who legitimately want to have good conversations, and we can have them. We can find commonalities between us. there's a lot of things you probably agree with the person who votes differently than you. We don't need to continuously be this toxic to each other. We don't need to feed into the divisiveness that these politicians and that these media sources are trying to paint for us. We don't need to kind of adhere to the kind of America that Trump wants, which is, you're either on one side or the other. And finally, unfortunately, while I was coming to make this episode, I was trying to think of some inspirational reason for why you should vote against Trump, or why you should cast your ballot for Biden. And I know that everyone has their different reasons about why they want to, vote, whether it be for environmental issues or for, just the, for criminal justice issues, for education issues, for the Supreme Court vacancy that's coming up and the reproductive rights that are now at stake for a lot of people. There are a lot of different reasons that you want to vote. And I personally think that, one of the things that we need to focus on when we are casting our ballots is that, let's not try to think of this election as trying to own the other side. Let's not try to think of this election as trying to own the conservatives, trying to own the liberals. Let's just think of this election as just trying to do the right thing. Like what is actually the right thing? For me, I am thinking about this as what kind of leadership do I want in my country? And I just adamantly reject the kind of leadership that Donald Trump has, projected onto this country. And I'll be voting against him when my ballot comes to me in the next couple of weeks. I know that there are probably some people on here who like Trump, who don't want to hear me say something like that. And my final thing that I have to say to you is that I can understand, some of the things that might be appealing about Trump. And I understand why you may not want to vote for Joe Biden. And I'm going to tell you that if Joe Biden gets into office, I'm going to be the first person to criticize him when he starts messing up, because I don't believe in partisanship. I don't believe in being a Democrat or being a Republican. I just believe in calling it as I see it. And if someone's not fit for office, I'm going to call it out like I see it. And right now, it is proven to me without a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump does not deserve to be the president of this country. He was not built for this job, and there is no part of him that actually wants to make America great again. He just wants to make America one nation under Trump. And I'll never get behind that. That's our show for today, everyone. Thank you again for listening to Independent Thought. You can always find me on any major platform that you're listening: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find us on any of those platforms. Please, if you are listening, give us a 5-star review. Please subscribe if you have not already. And if you did find this video on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Now, my final thought of the day is a quote that I want to share with all of you, as I've been sharing quotes these last few episodes. And so this is what I'm going to leave you with today. Far away there in the sunshine are my highest aspirations. I may not reach them, but I can look up and see their beauty, believe in them, and try to follow where they lead. And as always, remember, try to embrace your independence.